This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
You've seen and read my 3 Pillars ebook, and now I'm proud to announce my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and it's now out and ready for reading. This new book of mine is a full-length version of the teachings of the 3 Pillars, and in it I show you how to walk in the integrity of eternal and universal laws, in step with the law of attraction to consistently create the life you desire. Now, if you've ever wondered just why you can't consistently manifest all the good, loving, abundant, healthy, and happy things you desire, my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, will reveal the key in how to do just that. Plus, help you build a rock-solid personal foundation that will stand strong for the ages. Get your copy today. My new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship by Carl Gruber. Available now in ebook and paperback on Amazon.com. Welcome to yet another episode of this podcast, World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. I'm truly excited to welcome you back as we continue to dive headfirst into the seeking of the answer to the question, there's got to be something better than this out there. And what we have discovered through our one-on-one interviews and chats with some of the world's top experts in the areas of spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment is that something better comes from inside of you, not outside of you. So today we'll continue this exploration with our guest, but first I would like to invite you to get a copy of my brand new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, a book that will show you how to build a rock-solid personal foundation for your life based on eternal universal truths and laws in order to become a consistent co-creator with the universe to manifest the life you love to live and live the life you love. Now, let's check in with our featured guest. Janet Elaine Schmidt is the creator of the Reprogram for Success, and for a decade has been a practical yet potent Quantum Consciousness Accelerator, Integrative Holistic Healing Facilitator, Inspirational Speaker, Life Coach, and Lightworker. Now, she also has certifications in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, an NLP Life Coach, Hypnotherapy, eye movement integration, advanced PSYCH-K, advanced ThetaHealing, DNA re-engineering, and light code activation, and more. Wow, lots of great stuff. Can't wait to hear about those. So let's welcome Janet to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked this up front. Did I pronounce your last name right, Schmidt?
It's Schmidt, yes.
Okay, and do you like just Janet or Janet Elaine Schmidt?
Well, I put Janet Elaine Schmidt just as my full name for when people look me up, but you can call me Janet. It's fine.
Okay. I'm sorry, I should have done my homework prior to this.
That's okay.
But we're welcoming Janet from California. It's early in the morning for her, and I appreciate her being here. Now, I'm really interested in what you do with your clients and with yourself. Now, I did see that you tell an interesting story about a young woman who was financially well off but could not say no to anyone who came asking for a donation for financial help, and that her inability to say no put her in a financially precarious position that she almost lost it all. At the end of the story, you reveal that woman was you. Can you please elaborate on this?
Yes.
I'd love to hear this.
Well, that was kind of my journey into really understanding quantum physics and epigenetics and how that forms our reality, and how we have, I call that story inherited money consciousness, because we do have patterns that are passed down to us from our ancestors and our parents. And what happened was I went through a divorce. I ended up with a large sum of money, and I had always helped the underserved. As a child, I was always in there helping the underdog, supporting the underdog. And so here I was in a situation where I could help both nonprofits and individuals alike, expand and assist along the way. So I was very excited. But as time went on, people started hanging on to me for my money. And I couldn't say no. I had a hard time saying no. And this even goes to my children. I had a hard time saying no. And before long, I found myself in arbitration. You see, my financial advisor, who was with a well-known international firm, made an investment outside the scope of the investment firm. And now here I was in arbitration. And the whole time I was in arbitration, all I could think about was, I'm going to lose this money. And so we can say that's the quantum physics, right? That's the energy that we're putting out, right? Because Einstein said the frequency you put out, that's the reality you're bringing to you. So here I can understand that, but I couldn't understand everything else. And so as I went through this, sure enough, the financial advisor gets disbarred, his partner gets fined, the company gets fined, but I only got 10% of what I lost. And I lost a lot of money. And so I had to sit back and I started looking at what my life was about and where I got these traits and characteristics. I mean, I even went back through my childhood, and it was painful. It's a little bit doing shadow work, when we open the wounds to see where everything came from. And I started looking into like epigenetics. And what epigenetics says is that it's the imprinting. And this is in its broader sense. So if there's any scientists out there, I want to say this to you. But it is the imprinting passed down from our ancestors to our parents, and our parents pass it to us from the time we're born to about 8 years old. After that, it's anything catastrophic or anything or society that dictates our behaviors, our thoughts, our belief system, everything about us. And so I wanted to really understand why all these things were happening in my life. And so I went down that rabbit hole. And I tell this story because I think it's important for people to know that their inherited money consciousness, to take a look at your money consciousness, because I guarantee you a lot of it's inherited unless you've taken steps to change it up, to reprogram it.
Yeah, boy, that is absolutely so true. So epigenetics, which I haven't really studied that term closely, it sounds almost like Akashic records. You're a carryover from previous people and family and previous lives.
Yes, it's imprinting. The example I can give you is for the money consciousness story that I tell. I started looking into it, and I come from 8 generations of ministers who signed up to be economically challenged, who signed up to give their last cents to the underserved, and who had no money to manage. And I don't want to take away from their mission, because this is very admirable what they chose, but it wasn't what I chose in my lifetime. So I had to look at that. So it explained why I was always helping the underdog, why I was always helping the underserved, why I was losing money. Because if we only have a certain level of money consciousness, if I think $50 is a lot of money and I'm given 1,000, well, I'm going to lose until I get to the 50. I'm not going to hang on to it because of my money consciousness. And so this is how you can look. Fear is a big one that's passed down through generations. I had that one too, and it can be passed down. And And so it just takes you down that rabbit hole to really examine your behavior, and also to look at situations, not being the victim, but actually looking at what part of you was involved in it and what part of you brought it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really difficult for some people.
You know, that's almost like what I said in the intro, that, you know, we keep looking for something better out there, but then we find the better is that something better is inside of us.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
And also too, when you were going through that arbitration time with that financial difficulty, you kept saying, I'm going to lose it all. I'm going to lose it all. Well, that's classic law of attraction right there. What you think dwell upon is going to be sent to you, and it's hard too when you're in a state of fear and that type of thing. And I know you write and talk about your emotional guidance system, and that's very important. And we can get into that in a little bit. But I'm curious because you do something called Reprogram for Success that you teach to your clients. How does this work, and why is it important to reprogram ourselves?
Well, we repeat cycles, and this is why it's really important to reprogram. I was repeating a cycle with money. I was repeating a cycle in certain relationships. Abandonment was a big one. I was abandoned as a child in my family. Even though I was in the family, I was abandoned, and yet I repeated it in adulthood. So it's to understand where this is all coming from so that you can reprogram. Like fear's a big thing. And so when we can understand where that comes from, I can take a client, okay, let's see where fear came from. It came from your mother. And did she get it from her mother? And did she get it from her mother? So it's being passed down. So the first step is to understand where it's coming from, where it's located. And then once we locate it, we can go in and release it. And it's a process of using either Neuro-Linguistic Programming or ThetaHealing, either one. I use ThetaHealing if you're a meditator, if it's somebody who meditates, because when we use ThetaHealing, an individual goes into a theta state and the practitioner goes into a theta state, but the practitioner is able to energetically go into the field of the client, and they go down a timeline, release the fear, all the places that the fear shows up. And it's almost like a shoelace. Like once you find the original place of fear, it kind of goes boom, 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 all the way down. But you release that, and you put safety, security, and confidence in its place. And once you do that and you bring it back in, you've reprogrammed that part. But what about how to make it into a whole brain state? And I talk about a whole brain state in this Reprogramming for Success. It's very important. That means your left cortex and your right cortex are in an agreement on your new belief of safety, security, and confidence. And how is that done? It's done by, I can test your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind is never going to lie. Your subconscious mind runs 95% of your body. So it runs your muscles. So it's never going to lie. So if I said to you, do you have safety, security, and confidence? And you said, yes, I do. I could test you, and your muscles are not going to lie. So they'll either be strong or they're going to be weak. And at that point, there's a procedure where you can cross the body and you can bring it into a whole brain state by this process. And there's several different techniques that go with it that they use in PSYCH-K, but you can bring it in and your body goes into whole brain state on the new belief, and it's in. It's in within 15 minutes.
So you do muscle testing like that was developed by Dr. David Hawkins, where, you know, you're, like you said, your muscles don't lie. They know the difference between the truth and the non-truth. Interesting. So exactly what you're talking about, number one, you mentioned theta healing. I find that interesting because I've studied quite a bit Dr. Bruce Lipton's stuff. And,
yes.
He specifically states in his book that as children between the ages of 0 to 6 or 7, the children are actually in the theta state. And so literally children are hypnotized on a daily basis by those parents and people around them because they don't have more capacity or brain waves to overcome that. So literally we're hypnotized into those limiting paradigms. And then, then we spend the rest of our life doing, the processes that you have in order to overcome that. That's interesting how that works.
That's if you're aware of them. A lot of people go through life never aware, or my parents were like that, so I'm like that. No, you have a choice. We all have a choice. We've been given the power. Neuro-Linguistic Programming works very close to ThetaHealing in the fact that they use timelines. There's many other techniques in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, but they also use a timeline. But when we talk about Bruce Lipton, and I have to go back to Dr. Bruce Lipton, he wrote The Biology of Belief, and he was having trouble writing that book. And if you go in the back of that book, you'll see that he attributes PSYCH-K and the reason why he has great relationships he mentions PSYCH-K in the book to say that's why he has great relationships. And that's why he finished the book, was all because of PSYCH-K. So that PSYCH-K brings you into a whole brain state on your new belief. And that's why it's so important. And that's why when I moved the old belief out, and I even replace it with a new belief using Neuro-Linguistic Programming or ThetaHealing or even eye movement integration, I always come back in and almost double lock it down with PSYCH-K. PSYCH-K is always a part of any session I do.
So, and forgive me because I actually have never even heard of PSYCH-K. The letter K, what is it?
PSYCH-K is something that Dr. Rob Williams came up with. It's something he discovered. It was discovered about 30 years ago. And he realized that by doing certain motions with our body and doing certain testing, that we can actually change self-limiting beliefs into self-enhancing ones. And he put it through a lot of tests. Now, probably the reason why you haven't heard very much about it is there's only 35 instructors in the whole world. And out of the 30, and so there, think about how many are then in the United States. And then I'm an advanced facilitator. I never went back. And I believe that probably a lot of the people that go through the instructions probably stay like I am, an advanced facilitator, because it assists us in the other work we're doing. It's another tool.
Wow, you have so many beautiful certifications. I don't know how you found time to do all these. These are great. But, everything you're talking about is beautiful. I've studied a lot about it. But how is it any different than, say, regular psychiatry? People go to their psychiatrist and lay on the couch and they search for the these limiting beliefs. I mean, how is that different?
It's great. I never take away from somebody else's profession. So I think they add, there's always validity in everything. But if you really want to change a mindset, you really have to be able to move the old belief out and replace it with a more, move the limiting belief out and put in a self-enhancing belief. And the only thing I've found through all the work that I've done is that PSYCH-K, you can move out energetically, because I'm also a holistic energy healer as well. You can move out that energy and replace it with new energy, right? More self-enhancing energy. As Reiki does, I'm a Reiki master too, as Reiki moves energy, all of that. But if you want to get to the really solidified core of it, it's to bring your left cortex, which runs the logical and the right side of your body, and the right cortex, which runs the left side of your body, and it's your creative, to get them from arguing and get them on unity, on unified on your new belief.
Wow. And you kind of stated this earlier, and it's a little bit sad, but really most of the people in the world have no clue about where their limiting paradigms come from, or that they even can change them. But that is why we're doing a podcast like this, talking to experts like you. So we're trying to get that out there, and hopefully, people who watch or listen to this will benefit this. And I appreciate you doing that. But, I've also, been looking at all of that you do. You're a big purveyor of quantum physics, as I am too. But I'm really interested in this light code activation that you do. How does that work?
Well, we have light in our bodies anyway. We are light beings. It's been proven that we have light in our body. But a lot of time, most people they don't have 85%. In order to really manifest everything we want, we need to get our 85% of our light body in our body. And I never understood this until I studied with a teacher in Greece. And I actually went to him for an appointment, and he told me I was the one that was supposed to teach this and show it to people. And so basically it's a lot like epigenetics in this way too. We hold things in our body, which takes up room from our light body sliding in. So like for me, one of the things that held too much room in my body was I think my son was about 9 when I ended up getting divorced. And so I felt like I had 3 children. They were young. I felt like I had to be a mother and a father. And so I had taken that space up. So there was no space for a relationship because I had only space I already filled the space. Mm-hmm. And so by filling the space, you can't even bring the light in to where that's what's holding that space. So if you're holding that space, down in your solar plexus, there's no more space there. And so what I do is I'm able to find those little blocks that are in there that are holding that, and I can energetically move them out. And I also have you basically discard anything that doesn't serve you. Through a technique, I have people basically walk towards a light, and I just say, discard everything that doesn't serve you. And it just drops off of them. Energetically, it will just drop off. Whatever they're ready to release at that time, it will drop off. And then the light comes in, and the light will just start flowing in after everything's kind of loosened up and taken out. And whether they're holding energetically on to children who have passed, or to even babies that, have never been born, those take up space because they have an imprint in us. And so once we release all those imprints, now the light can just flow right in. And sometimes it goes in like a thud. I've had a couple of clients where I've even felt it. It's gone, and they look at me, and I'm looking at them. It's pretty marvelous, I have to say.
So you can personally perceive and feel energy and light that maybe other people can't?
We all can. We just close ourselves off to it.
Yeah.
I believe we all can do the same thing. I don't believe that there's anyone that can't do what I do, or I can't do what somebody else does. I think some of it's just learning. I think some of it's opening us up. We've been so programmed, not to, it's kind of like being programmed to all the negative. It's easier for us to hear, the news is negative than all the good news that's happening in the world, right? And that's part of the problem of the vibration that goes out. But I think we've been programmed that it's been unacceptable, but it is acceptable, and everybody can do what everybody else can do. There isn't one energetic being that can't heal themselves. I believe we all are healing beings, and it's just your self-limiting belief keeps you from that, your program.
Well, and I love that you mentioned that we're all light beings, and that is such in resonance with quantum physics. Even one of the most famous quantum physicists ever, David Bohm, stated that humans, we really are just congealed or frozen light. And
Yes.
a very difficult concept for the everyday layman who's just going about, trying to earn a buck and go about their day and going to McDonald's for dinner. Oh, you're just congealed light, huh? but it's true. Quantum physics has shown that proved this. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Getting back to, why people don't recognize this. I think also when you start to have to go down that rabbit hole and you start to have to examine yourself and stop blaming other people for what happened and actually look at your part in it and look at the programming you have, that's painful and it takes work. And some people don't want to go down that lane.
And again, talking about programming, I'm really curious. I think about this a lot. Why do you think it is that humanity in general and society throughout all the history of humankind feels that we need to be programmed to speak in limiting and disempowering manners? And why is humankind come to that point that we need to train each other to be limited like that?
Well, part of my feelings about the negativity is that when we experience something that's negative, right, we don't want to repeat it. So boy, that gets imprinted really heavy, right? But when we have something that's just awesome that happens to us, we hang on to it in a different way. And for some reason that I find through all the work that I've done, that negativity seems to have a deeper wound, a deeper imprint in us than something that's just marvelous. And something that's marvelous is wonderful, but it's almost fleeting at times. Whereas because we don't want to repeat that negative thing, we hang on to that energy, and sure enough, we repeat the thing again, only in a different scenario. Because we're hanging on energetically to that imprint. But I think it's and that's why I think it's easier for negativity to stick around, because we hang on to it. And it's become such a program now in our society. I don't even watch the news, actually. I figure if something catastrophic happens, somebody's going to tell me. Until then, I don't watch the news. If I do anything, I might read headlines and read, just to keep a tiny bit updated, so I might know a little bit. But I never watch the news. It's funny because one time I was talking to my son about it, and I said to him, I can't watch it. And he goes, yeah, I can understand that. He said, they're kind of like ESPN. They play to their sports base.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah, that's funny because I basically, if I do look at anything, it's sports and the weather. So, but this whole conversation actually could lead us down the rabbit hole of spirituality, talking about why is humanity negative based, and talk about the ego and the dream of separation. As I told you earlier, I'm a huge A Course in Miracles student, and my viewers and listeners know that, and that this life actually is a dream of separation, and the ego is the main driving force of dualistic belief. There's hate and sin and chaos and war and all that, when in truth it's not real. I mean, from a true spiritual perspective.
This is correct. I believe this is a journey to find, I think it's a journey to find your true self, your true divine self, your true, to release, to know that, to surrender to the fact that we live in a time that this is an illusion. And that's hard for people to understand, that because we're living in that 3D world, right? But the more you're able to, I don't know about you, this is the best way to explain it. I don't know about you, but right, right now, in the being that I am today, very little bothers me at all. Very little.
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much stay in that middle line of the yin and the yang, in harmony. And I try, and the more we can stay in that, the more we can start aligning, not only with our higher self, but above our higher self is cosmic consciousness or Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we're meant to be, is to hold the highest level we can while living on this earth. And it's very difficult for people to work through what we're saying, because it's easy for me to say all these things, but to implement them and to surrender to it, and to know that you're prosperous, to know that you're meant to have your everything that you desire, and really it's not that hard. And it is hard for people to kind of let go, because they're so caught in their mind instead of their heart, because it is the heart that basically is what is connected to the Christ or the cosmic consciousness and our higher self too.
Well, even the semantics of it, if you're talking to somebody who has no clue about what we're talking about, hopefully what we're saying will help them open up. But if you even say Christ consciousness, so many people have been programmed since they were little tiny children with religious dogma, and they may hate it. Oh, what are they talking about? Religion? No, this is not religion at all. It's true spirituality.
That's why I turn it around. I also say cosmic consciousness if somebody gets caught up on that, because people get so caught up in their religions. And I'm going to say this as somebody that came from 8 generations, which I had to deprogram a lot to just say what I really believe. And so what I would say to people is, let go of your concept of religion in that fact, or put religion in there and say God.
Mm-hmm.
Say God, if that's because that's, a lot of people call it all that is,
Right.
So if you have a problem with the word Christ consciousness, put God.
Yeah. So,
or that.
Verse, yeah, right. Well, very interesting. So, your own life too, going back to that experience of going through a divorce, and then having all that money that you literally gave away and got in trouble with it. And then, you're raising a couple young kids. So you basically went through a form of catharsis. I even write about this in my book. Does a person who has free will really have to go through a catastrophe or catharsis in order to raise their consciousness to Christ consciousness?
I don't know anybody yet that hasn't. And that's what I have to say about that. I don't know anyone who has not. And I don't know anyone who hasn't gotten expanded, or I don't always like, or transitioned, constantly transitioning without having to examine either their wounds, we can call them wounds, or shadow self, or whatever happened in your past, cleanse it and release it. I don't know anyone who's been able to then, go to their higher self, or without doing some of this work and going through something catastrophic. And that's only one thing that I did go through. But I would also ask people, look at your life and think how many times the higher self, or even the cosmic consciousness, has knocked at your door to wake you up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guarantee you they have this has happened in your life. I had it happen many times, and it was like, are you awake yet? Are you awake yet? I mean, I even levitated off of a table, and I still went back into that 3D worry dogma. And so I had many other instances kind of similar to this, And it was always, I would always pull myself back into that 3D dogma, always back into the drama, the negativity, until I finally reached a point going, okay, let's look at this.
Well, that's cool. I can imagine you floating above that table and your kids looking, oh, mom's floating. And yeah, but my thought is that as you start to become enlightened and aware about all these things we're talking about, and you come to understand that we are born with free will to choose, that when you are faced with a possible catastrophe or catharsis, that you can actually choose not to go down that road. And again, as we know, we've talked about this before, most people don't even realize that they have the free will. But if you understand that you have the free will to choose not to walk down that dark shadow path, I think that's beautiful, and it's a freeing feeling.
Well, you're talking about having the will to choose the higher will.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line, is understanding that you do have the choice to align with your higher will, your higher self-will, which is the next step to cosmic or Christ consciousness.
Wow, this is a great conversation. We're talking to Janet Schmidt, and she is an amazing, amazing teacher. So many beautiful certifications in helping so many people. I would also like to talk about, and again, I found out this about you. What are the quantum and golden codes? What are they, and how do they work?
Well, the golden codes are codes that were used from Shambhala, if people are familiar with Shambhala, but the codes come from there. Those are called the golden codes. And the quantum codes were created by an engineer in Russia. He had figured out that, I think his name is Gabaldi, and he had figured out that each number, just like words, have different vibrations. So like the word love has a higher vibration than hate, right? So he had figured out also the numbers have that. And so they had learned that if they put certain numbers together, so unexpected money, for those listening, unexpected money is 520. So 520, 741, 8, and you space it apart. And if I tell you, I tested this out when I first started talking about these, and I had things, I had 2 lawsuits. I had no idea that I was part of that I got money from. I had no idea, and they came in the mail. So so the quantum codes, that's how they're formed, and you can look them up. And the golden codes of Shambhala, they're kind of work the same way. They have the same vibration. They have certain vibrations that are for different activities that you want to do, like protection on all levels is 101011111212. And that's protection on all levels. And so there's just different codes. So there's angel codes too, like 78777 is Archangel Raphael. So they have codes for all different things, even for healing. So I started, there's a guy named Brian Scott. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he introduced these, and he started painting with them. So I started painting with them, and I just treated it as an experiment. So I'd write the codes, whatever it was. So if it's all on abundance, I would use all abundance codes. And I did this painting, and I had my daughter look at it, didn't tell her what it was about. And she goes, I want that painting. That painting's amazing. I want that painting. And it made sense because I know what she was working on. So it's like, and then I did another one on cellular regeneration. And, that was one that somebody wanted too, because it speaks to you, because what happens is those codes get absorbed in the paint and it comes to you. But on a higher level is, I would say to somebody, look for the codes that are going to assist you. And I would memorize them and then view them in your third eye
Really?
And
So just if you take these like numbers for money abundance or money attraction, all you have to do is visualize these numbers or write them down and dwell upon them.
yeah, and I put them in my third eye. I view them in my third eye. But I have to say, when I did that money one, I had them written on Post-its at first.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was an experiment I tried, because I was like, okay, let's see if this is really solid.
Wow. This is so cool because my most recent podcast I did with Kim van de Sande from the Netherlands, she was on my show and channeled the Flower of Love Collective, multi-dimensional beings, and they speak about active code activations for healing and light, just like you're talking about.
Yeah, I actually use these code activations sometimes when I'm healing somebody. I may not, if I'm working with a more linear person, I may not tell them that I'm working with them, but I work with them and I integrate them into my practice. So it's part of, once I learned them and saw what they could do, I started integrating, like cellular body regeneration in the golden codes is 44, 44, 4. So for those who are listening, that's what it is. And it's very simple. And it's amazing once you start kind of using them.
And cellular regeneration, that's for healing?
It's for healing. It's also for somebody, if you want to stay younger looking, what a great natural way to do it.
Or you can go run a marathon.
Or you can go run a marathon.
Make sure you eat a lot of carbs later. So, but wow, this is just fantastic information. This is just really great. I would like to go back because the first time I ever heard of NLP or Neuro-Linguistic Programming was many, many years ago from Tony Robbins, who's a big student of NLP. I forget who the guy who invented it. But can you explain exactly how NLP works and what it is?
Sure. So it's Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So neuro is the mind or the state of the mind or the brain. Linguistics is the way we communicate, whether it be in language, because we have nonverbal communication as well. And then program is just the programming that you have. And so it has, what I can do is just by having a client come in and say, how can I assist you? That's all I have to say. And I can listen to them. And just by the words and the body language that they use, I can put together why they're in front of me. And that's how easy it is. And so I would tell people, you communicate only 7% with your words. 93% of what you communicate is nonverbal. So I would say to all the listeners, start looking at the people who are communicating to you, but start seeing how you communicate to them. And I say that by, if I asked you if you wanted to help me with a fundraiser, and you said yes, but your body and your eyes and your facial expression look like a deer caught in the headlights. Well, you said yes, 7%, and 93% said no.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, sure, Janet, I'll help you with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's also to understand, part of neuro-linguistic programming is also to understand there's so many facets to it. It's to understand that our inner talk is one of the most damaging things we can do to ourselves. I call those thoughts that we have ants, automatic negative thoughts. And so when we have automatic negative thoughts, for my clients, I always give them the line, and I think it might have been by Joseph Murphy, isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me right now. I say the minute a thought like that comes in, you use, isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me right now. And you will begin to stop having those thoughts. So I use a bunch of different tools, but that is one of them. They also have one thing that I love to use with my clients. I call it an emotional resilience tool, is the 1 point. And the samurais used to use this prior to going into the battle, because you see, they understood that with all the thoughts in their head, possibly getting killed and all of that would be up in their head, they'd be top heavy. So they wouldn't be centered. And so when you're top heavy, you're easier to knock off the horse. So they would go through this process where they would take all the thoughts in their head and bring it down to 2 inches below their navel, which is your hara point. And then they'd flow it from there down their legs to the ground, to the center of the earth. And once they did that, their brain, they were clear and they were centered. So I do this technique. It's 90 seconds. And I have my clients, I teach it to them. So whether you're in a board meeting and you just have to step out to get clarity, or you're with your kids and you have to step out to get clarity, it doesn't matter. This is one way to just flush it all out and start with an emotional balance so that your emotional intelligence can be at its highest level.
Very cool stuff. So, you know, it really is amazing on how unaware majority of people are of our limiting paradigms, and like the Neuro-Linguistic Programming, that what I think you said, 7% of what we say is actually what we mean. And so it's like the 9/10 of the iceberg below the water line that we don't see, right? And we may be saying one thing with our minds, with our words, but our actions and eyes and other things are saying different things.
Yeah, it's like the other thing is if you really watch people's eyes when they're talking, they can tell you so much.
Oh, yeah.
So like if somebody's looking up to the left-hand corner while they're talking to you, they're actually recalling information. They're seeing the vision and they're recalling it. If somebody's looking up to the right-hand corner, they're creating a vision. Okay. So, you know, like if I was talking to my kids and I said, tell me a story, I guarantee you most of the time they're looking up there because they're creating the story.
So interesting. With myself, I've noticed on my podcast when I'm talking, and I'm sure my viewers notice that a lot of times I kind of, when I'm asking, I look up like this, and I must be recalling stuff down, I guess.
You're recalling information. It's the same thing. If you look to the side, you're recalling audio. Or you're creating audio, and it's kinesthetic if you look down. But you mostly create with your right. Remember, your right side is creative and your left side is logical. So you're going to remember. So that's another part of neuro-linguistic programming that it goes into, and it goes into paradigms. It goes into the 3 different ways that we hold information, we take information in. So there's deletion, which we can look at. You can go to a function and you're all sitting at the table and the speaker gets up, but everybody at your table's talking. And if you just delete the information everybody's talking, you can be laser focused on the person in front of you. But if all you do is do that all the time in life, you're going to miss some really important information that's going to help you down the line.
Well, you know, it's too, just thinking about myself again. I actually, for me, for where I am consciously and spiritually, I almost think like I'm looking up to my higher self. Hey, feed me some information.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's possibly because you're looking straight up. You're not looking to either side.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask you one last thing, because, you know, as you and I were talking before we came on, we're both very interested in the power of ThetaHealing, of which I'm a facilitator of a big Facebook group of that. I'd like to find out more, and you may have actually explained a lot of this already, about your integrative holistic healing as a facilitator. How does that work? And I guess you kind of talked about that already.
I do. I use all the modalities together. When somebody comes in, and it depends on what they're coming to me for. So if it's a business team that wants to align so that they can be cohesive moving forward, I keep everything very linear, and I go into neuro-linguistic programming because it's more linear. And then I come in with PSYCH-K because it's also scientifically proven. So I use those 2, but I may use some of my energy modalities to facilitate. But with someone who comes to me for everything I do, I integrate absolutely everything I do together, depending on what the soul, the individual in front of me is requesting at the time. Like it just naturally comes out what anybody needs, whether I should say that, whether it's linear or not, or more creative, it's going to come out.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I find it interesting that you also work with businesses and organizations with what you do. I would imagine you have to have some fairly enlightened managers and CEOs in order to bring you in, because we know many businesses are just stuck in hardwired paradigms that, well, this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Some of the younger ones are more accepting. I do find that they can accept the reprogramming part, my workshop that I explain how we're programmed, so that they can see, because the one thing about a business is it's really important for them to understand how everybody in their group is programmed. So if you can understand somebody's gone through something catastrophic, you can understand this, you can understand different backgrounds, then you can create the strategy. It gives you the emotional intelligence to create the strategy moving forward, to create a cohesive team. So I don't go to change all the belief systems of people there. It's only the goals that the team has. So if it's to exceed the sales for that week or that month, or if it's to create a cohesive team that exceeds what they ever thought, or whatever goals they have, I get everybody in agreement on those goals. And so I'll use PSYCH-K and take them in separately. I don't do PSYCH-K in front of anyone, because it's very personal on how you test. And so because some people might only need one balance, some people might need two to achieve what they want to achieve. So I always do it in private, but that's how it works for them. And then for individuals, it just depends on what they want to achieve. And so I will go to that extent of what they want to achieve. I had a client just come to me, she said, all my relationships are great, this is great, but my abundance in my companies aren't working. So we only did work on her abundance. And sure enough, a month later, she told me she had the best month she ever had.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, this entire conversation, Janet, is quite a lot to digest, and some beautiful, beautiful information. I love everything you're doing, and thank you for doing what you do. I do have to ask you this, with all your beautiful experiences and your abilities to accomplish these things, any books in the work? I didn't see that if you have a book.
I am working on a book called All Encompassing. And it also has a big chapter on voice consciousness in it. Because we all have this voice consciousness, but it's how I discovered my voice consciousness. And it's what my voice consciousness has not only said to me, but what the voice consciousness has said to my clients, because I literally channel before I meet with them. I may not tell them the information, but I always channel before I meet with somebody. And so I have that, but all encompassing is my journey on to get here, so that people can maybe try some of the things that I tried, because it became all encompassing for me and it still is. I'm still on this journey where it is all encompassing for me, for that Christ consciousness or that cosmic consciousness, to release that our free will, and to make it the higher will, to connect it. And I think we're all on that journey, but it's all encompassing.
Any time frame on when we can look for that book? But I know it took me a few years to put mine together. I'm
literally hoping by May.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will definitely get a copy of that. This has just been beautiful. One last thing, how can people connect with you if they want to work with you and follow you? And what's your website?
My website is janetelainschmidt.com. I keep it very simple.
Okay.
My Instagram is janetelainschmidt.com. My LinkedIn is that also. So you can find me that way.
Okay, and I will put those links in the show notes for this show so people can connect with Janet Schmidt.
Oh, one last thing. If anybody mentions that they've heard me on your show, I'll give them 50% off their first session.
Oh man, I heard you on my show. I'm going to sign up. Wow, this is great. Well, thank you for that, Janet. I really appreciate the wonderful, wonderful chat. And like I said, when I'm done here, I got a lot to think about this. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And just remember, everybody, success is real in every area of your life, but the power's in your hands.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.